the laws of the earth are such that it limits the amount of possibilities through which life can be achieved. So, if you believe there is no God, or if you believe there is a God, if there is no God, regardless, the conditions of the earth, the laws of the earth, limits the amount of possible outcomes which can achieve life. If you believe there is a God, God has limited the amount of possible outcomes through which, or the amount of possible possibilities through which life can be achieved, the goal of life. So, out of the infinite amount of possibilities, only one slice, one thin slice out of that whole infinite layer of possibilities, only one thin slice is what are the requirements that have to be met before life can be produced. That's called the fine tuning. Okay, even for vision, after sight is achieved, if our, like, I don't know the technical terms of it, but this is how they explain it. If our vision doesn't meet that spectrum or that layer, that percentage out of that thin slice, out of the infinite amount of possibilities, we can't see. So it's not enough to have vision. No, the earth also has to have that same spectrum, and the sunlight, it's like so much things to it, but let's just stick with life to keep it simple, right? But what I'm trying to tell you is the same thing goes for hearing. It gets deep, but there are infinite amount of possibilities that things can be done, but there's only one thin slice out of all those possibilities through which life can be achieved. So if we are a result of random events and chance and evolution, I like to call it, then what that basically means is since there is only one thin, so from this is how the math goes. It's like from one end of our solar system to the other end of our solar system are the amount of possibilities that things can be done on the earth. But out of all those possibilities, a line which your own eyes can't see, that's how thin that line is. That is a requirement that that those circumstances have to go through in order for life to be achieved. So, side note, if there is a God, which obviously there is, that means that he has made sure that there are no other routes to life except through the routes that he has deemed fit. So he has made the laws so tightly bound and so tightly shut up, so that there is no other possibility for life. And in order to get life, you have to not only know what you're doing, but you're going to need supernatural intervention. But okay, let's get back to if we were to come here through random events. Since there's only one possible way to reach life, but yet the planet is teeming with innumerable amounts of all sorts of life, that means that if there is no God, that means that the planet is desperately trying to produce life. Think about that. If there is only one way to achieve life out of an infinite amount of possibilities on planet Earth, but yet only one outcome reaches to life, but yet the planet is teeming with innumerable amounts of life, that means that the Earth is desperately trying to reach life. And so At first attempt, it fails. At another attempt, it fails. At another attempt, it fails. At another attempt, it fails because it's not hitting the mark, but it's trying to hit the mark. And then somewhere over billions of years, it finally hits the mark, right? So that means it's desperately trying to reach life. So if it's desperately trying to reach life, why is it that now that it has achieved life, it is also desperately trying to kill life? Because nature breaks down life. Nature doesn't build up life. Nature is so detrimental to life, but because it happens slowly, we don't realize, and obviously we know it's detrimental to life, but because it doesn't happen as quickly as fire burns wood, right? Because fire is detrimental to wood, but it happens instantly. Not instantly, but it takes time and you see the effect like right away, right? But because the deteriorating effects of nature against life is not as fast as fire is to wood, is not as destructive as quickly as fire is to wood, foolish people conjure up in their foolish imaginations that perhaps it's possible for nature, the same elements that breaks down life, that perhaps it's possible for it to also produce life. No. There is no world where fire can ever produce wood. And if there is one possible line of activity where fire could produce wood and preserve it out of an infinite amount of possibilities, well then chances are it will never happen, which is why we can't even fathom that. But that's because we have good enough knowledge and common sense about what fire does to wood. You have to have that same sense of what nature does to life. If nature was not destructive to organic entities and biological entities and basically just life, if nature was not destructive to life, then a cell would not need a cell wall to protect itself against nature, against the elements of nature. A cell would not need a cell membrane to protect itself from against the elements, the destructive elements of nature. Humans would not need skin to protect ourselves from the elements of nature. Certain creatures would not need scales or exoskeletons to protect themselves from the elements of nature. So if nature is what produced life, why is it that life is also desperately protecting itself from the elements of nature if nature is what produced it? But let's get back to my initial point. If there is no God, but yet there is only one slither of an accumulate of perfect a perfect accumulation of events to lead to life, it's only one slither out of an infinite amount of possibilities, which every single one of them does not lead to life, then that means that the planet has to desperately be trying to produce life. Otherwise, the job just would never get done, because how can it? If it's not attempting to reach it, it would never get done. But not only does it attempt to reach it, but it reaches it, and it has to be error-free from the very first living cell. Otherwise, it has to start the process all over again. It's funny that evolutionists use time as the answer for all their questions. That, oh, given enough time, this can happen. But, I mean, like, is it just me? Or don't they realize that time is the enemy? Things break down over time. Time does not preserve any organic compounds to give it time to work out a solution to evolve. If the system is not already perfectly functioning, time is going to break it down, which is why everything that is already alive has to desperately work to keep itself alive, because it's fighting the destructive effects of time. So if an organism is not yet alive, well, in order for it to become alive, it has to first become organic. I forget the term for it, but it has to first become flesh before it takes its first breath of air, for lack of a better term, right? because we're talking about a cell. We're not even talking about humans, right? We're talking about a cell. Before it takes its first movement, that means it's not yet alive. So if it's not alive, how is it preserving itself against the deteriorating effects of nature and time to work out its problems to then become alive over billions of years? It would have broken down billions of years before it even got to life, because things break down. Chemicals break down over time. And there's nothing in nature to preserve anything. And it would always get contaminated with dirt, dust, wind, the elements. If you had a cell and you punctured that cell, this is the video that I posted, I think my last video. It's just like a, let me stick on top because I don't have much time. But yeah, it's my last video. If you were to puncture a cell, right, a cell begins to leak out. All its organisms begin to spill out, right? Because nature is spilling it out. Nature is not going to bring it together to put the elements of the cell back into the cell and cover it with its cell wall. No. If a cell gets punctured and it's not a big puncture, the cell will repair itself because the cell has the mechanisms within the cell to repair itself. It's not nature that's repairing the cell. It's the cell that is already alive that is going to put itself back together. But if the wound is too big, the cell can try to put itself together, but nature would prevent it from doing that because the wound is too big. So now the cell, even though it's alive, it has no authority over itself now because nature is going to take over. So if you were to have your arm cut off, okay, if it was to cut off like a big chunk, maybe it could be sewn together and you could get your connective tissues back. But if the cut is too big, and let's say the bone is like hanging, nature is going to take its course and you won't be able to recover. You're going to lose your arm. So it's not nature that's going to fight for you. It's your own body that's alive that's going to fight for you. But nature is going to try to break you down. God has done this intentionally so that you will be without excuse to deny his existence. He's intentionally made nature destructive to life so that you will know that it's not nature that built you, because nature is trying to break you down, dummy. If wood is living inside a fire, then you know that it took supernatural intervention for that wood to be there, because you know fire breaks down wood. That's why God made nature and time so destructive against every organic entity and every organism. So that cell, you're not going to be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's gone. So now all its elements that was inside his body is leaked out into the environment. In what world will nature put that cell back together? So now here it is, you have a cell that's already, it has all its elements in one microscopic area, and yet still nature would not be able to put it back together again. So how do you expect nature to get parts from different, like far away, and bring the cell together and produce and cause it to live with the breath of life within it? And a cell is basically dirt, is it not? In what world does dirt build itself up into a living flesh with connective tissues and being able to self-replicate, and the DNA? If an organism becomes an organism through random events, how does it then come to have an instruction manual on how to stay the way it is and how to become the way it is, and how so that it can self-replicate to produce another entity like itself? If you bake a cookie, that's chemistry, right? We obviously, if evolution is true, then we got here through chemical evolution. That's what it's called in the origin of life. If you were to bake a cookie, that's chemistry. However you come to derive at any outcome through chemistry, is there going to be a baking manual, a cooking instruction within the cookie, or chemical chemistry that you've just done? Is there going to be some chemical handbook, DNA inside of it, telling you how you derived at that compound? No. So it tells you that someone made it and put the instructions there so that it can